Hello and welcome to the Just Mates podcast, where we aim to destigmatise men not speaking up about mental health. Remember to follow our social pages on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Just Mates Pod. You can listen to and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor and Apple Podcast. All links are provided in the description. In today's episode, we discuss alcoholism. This is our 10th episode. Woo! Yeah. Number 10.
Yeah. So today we'll be discussing alcoholism. I mean, it's a bit of a weird subject, really, because I don't necessarily drink much. I'm not really much of a drinker like a couple of my mates. And Naf, you don't drink at all, do you?
No, religious purposes, I don't drink.
Yeah. So,
but I've been around people that have, and obviously I've witnessed like people drinking, etc. So there are like the repercussions that even I've seen.
Yeah. There are a lot of repercussions for it, and it can just, I don't know, it just deteriorates your way of life and people do that sort of thing. But I think the aim for this podcast is to kind of, we've got Simon coming on this. He'll give a little bit of his background and stuff, and he's well equipped to talk about alcoholism, the recovery process, how it affects you, and it affects different people in different ways. You know, it's like anything. But he'll touch on a lot of things which are really important, and we haven't covered I think we've touched substance abuse a little bit, but we haven't gone in full depth into it.
And I think it'll be interesting because Simon, as you said, has a bit more of a professional outlook on this. And he'll have a lot more experience in saying the right things and the right kind of advice that we need to give out.
Definitely.
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
As well, I saw recently on This Morning they were discussing mental health on Mondays, and a lot of the stuff that the therapist or the counsellor that was on there that was answering phone calls, they are things that we've mentioned, and where we're not professional, we're not professions in this industry, the advice we've given is very relevant, and I stand by everything that we've told.
Yeah, definitely. And given our own personal experiences, and you know, if at least one person can relate to anything that we're saying, then I think we've done our job, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll be inviting Simon onto this call, we'll go from there. He'll give us a bit of a description about himself, and then we'll discuss in depth about alcoholism and the after effects, the during, the pre, and we'll delve into quite a lot of it.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll go into the recovery process, warning signs, and you're just it's going to be a good one, right?
Yeah,
shoot.
Definitely.
Okay. So episode 10, we got Simon Mitchell on the podcast. Simon's my uncle, always been one of my true idols in the family, always been a great friend, really, really intelligent guy. Simon, if you want to give a little bit of your intro, tell people about yourself, what you've been through, what you currently do. We'll just crack on from there.
Okay, hi, I'm Simon. Honoured to be here. Thanks again for the invitation and for that. Welcome, Sam. I hope I can live up to your expectations. The reason that I've been invited on, as I understand it, is because I'm an alcoholic. I have a lifetime experience of dealing with the horrors of addiction, and I have this great honour of sharing that experience in the hope that it might help somebody out there today. So I'm a 46-year-old father of two. I live in Devon. I was a businessman right up until 2015, sold a business that I'd built over 15 years, and I'm now in the process of a career change, and that involves a postgraduate studies in psychology. So I'd like to get into addiction recovery in some form. I'm not entirely sure what form that'll take yet, but one of the great things about the kind of trials and tribulations of life is that if we come through it, then very often we've got lessons and tools and whatnot that we can share with other people and help them through the darkness in their lives. So that's that's where I am today. I'm 3 years sober on Friday.
That's brilliant.
This is quite a significant time for me in my recovery.
Yeah.
And so let me tell you a little bit about my story. I was born to two loving parents. I got 3 siblings, twin sister. That's Sam's mum, and as I say, I had a very loving parents, and in many respects, a very healthy and happy childhood. But I've never met an addict. I've never met an alcoholic that hasn't had some sort of adverse childhood experience. So, and sometimes that is the fault of the parents and sometimes it's not. And I certainly don't blame my parents for the challenges that I faced as a child, and still have a very good relationship with them. But what you generally find is that, as I say, that alcoholics have had some sort of trauma in their childhood, and I can talk more about that later. But I came through into adolescence with a kind of I was a shy extrovert. I wanted to be center of attention, but I was a bit anxious about being. I felt vulnerable, and I always felt slightly different and marginalized, a bit of an outsider. Very kind of philosophical and interested in understanding the deeper meaning in life and why people behave the way they behaved, and became a bit of a rescuer. I wanted to fix problems in the family and beyond. Just, there's lots of psychological formal terms for this, enmeshment and stuff like that, but we won't go into that. But the fact is that I kind of got into my adolescent years and I wasn't that confident in relating to other people. I had lots of friends, but never really felt that I could relate really deeply with them. And so when I went off to university when I was 18, I was brought up, my parents were God-fearing people and Christian, and I'd kind of been sheltered to some extent, of significant extent, from what they would talk of as worldly pursuits. So when I went out into the world at university, it was all brand new to me. The whole idea of going out and drinking and partying, and I was let off the leash, and I didn't really have the tools, I don't think, and I hadn't really the structure to know how to manage that. The first time that I went out and had those drinks, and suddenly realized that this elixir made me bulletproof. I felt $1 million. I felt funny. I felt clever. I felt attractive. Rather than kind of working around the periphery, I was right in the center. I was a member of the in group. I was attracting the attractive girls, and it was if you've ever seen Jim Carrey's The Mask, it was Ipkiss in his brown pajamas with his sad life and no girlfriend and so on, and suddenly he finds that mask, puts it on, and he's everything that he wanted to be. That was it. That was my kind of baptism of alcohol.
Did you, Simon? Did you drink at all before you went to uni?
Yeah, I did a little bit, but because I was living at home and my parents were, as I say, pretty strict Christians, I couldn't come home smelling of alcohol. So it was difficult, and so I had no idea really at that point that I was. That I was susceptible to alcoholism, and that would be the path that I would take. So I had some experiences of alcohol, but nothing much. Got to university, and suddenly I realised that, I could be this superhero in my own mind. I probably looked a right dick to everyone else, but I thought I was the dog's kahunas. so that was it. So as far as I was concerned, to have a good time, you have alcohol. And to be honest, I think things are changing these days a little bit. But at that time, this is like 1992. At that point, that's what we did. We all went and got drunk and had an amazing time. And everyone else was doing it. And I got a name pretty quickly. They started calling me Smurf because I got into Smirnoff. And and I would started carrying a bottle of vodka around on my inside pocket, and I was preloading before I went out. And it was a real kind of, prestige to, or accolade to being the one that drunk the most and ended up with the most battle wounds and ended up in the most trouble. And, I started to get into trouble with the warden and with tutors, and then it got a bit further, and I ended up in hospital with, various injuries, and then it went further and started getting involved in the police. And, by the time I was 19, I was in prison. I've been involved in violent crime while I was drunk, and the descent into the darkness was so rapid. Because while I was drunk, I was completely out of control. I was drinking to blackout, and I just had absolutely no off switch.
Yeah.
So, that wasn't enough at no point did I think that drinking was the problem. I thought drinking was fun, and people who didn't drink were boring, and, there was no way I was ever going to stop doing that. And so when I left university, I carried on doing it. I've always been a high achiever, though. I've always I did well at school and college, and somehow got a degree, despite being in prison during it. And then I got a job, and it was a pretty good job in IT. But the thing was that, I couldn't drink all the time like I did at university. So I started to binge drink at weekends. So it'd start on a Thursday, and I'd drink. I'd drink heavily on Thursday night, but Friday was, I could manage a hangover on a Friday because I could drink at lunchtime, maybe leave a bit early. And then that was it. The gloves were off. The boring mundanity of working week had gone, and now the real sparkling, exciting side of life could start. And I would drink and party and just go on an adventure that I had no idea where it was going to take me. And kind of come round from it at some point in the early hours of Monday morning, and the anxiety would kick in about getting into work, and stinking of booze and just feeling rotten and anxious, couldn't hold eye contact with people and so on. And so I'd miss a lot of Mondays, phone in sick and whatnot. But I still didn't realise that it was a problem. I just thought, you work to live. Work is just a way of getting enough money to be able to party at the weekends.
And I think to an extent it is kind of like that when you're a kid. I mean, we didn't really touch on it, but like I think university is kind of like a building ground for a lot of alcoholics.
Yeah.
Realistically. And you can't really see if something's a problem because people are always going out 2 or 3 times a week anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you say, it's a bit of a mask for it, if I'm honest. I can guarantee I've probably got like a handful of mates that are alcoholics because of university. I can just see that, and I don't think that's spoken about enough, really.
Yeah.
I think like as well, I was never a drinker and I never drank, but my friends from my class did and stuff. So I was obviously always invited, but never went. And I felt like the odd one out. But I guess it made me feel like an outsider on the other perspective of it.
Yes, yeah. That's really interesting, Naf, because I'm experiencing that now. Because there's a social aspect or influence on people's drinking habits, and it's a social norm. Yeah. Although that is changing actually, because drinking's on the decline. I think is it? Is it?
Is it?
Yeah, it has been on the decline for a while. With younger people, so there's an aging population in this country, obviously, and they continue to drink, particularly men. But the younger generations are abstaining in greater in numbers than they ever have.
Yeah, I think it's also. I guess while you were a kid as well, and around your generation, it was more of a personality trait.
Yeah. It was definitely, drinking was definitely, at university, if you didn't drink, you were boring, and you'd be part of the out group.
Yeah.
So the interesting point that you make there, Sam, I think is can you drink yourself into alcoholism? I.e., could you go to university as a child, or as a young adult that has not suffered any trauma or attachment issues or any kind of have any real personality problems? So you're secure in yourself and confident and so on, and then you drink, and as a result of your drinking, you develop an issue with alcohol. In my experience, certainly at the end of the spectrum where we talk about people being alcohol dependent or having, severe alcohol use disorder, using kind of modern terminology, what we would all in lay terms call an alcoholic. They've all had problems, in my experience, in childhood, and drinking. The alcohol is not the problem. Alcohol is the solution. So it fixes a problem that they have in terms of the way they regulate their emotions, for example, or how they relate to other people, and rather than it being something, the alcohol is the issue, and by drinking it it becomes problematic.
Yeah, it's a social lubricant, isn't it? Really, like in a sense, because I have kind of struggled really with kind of self-esteem, and when I go to parties and everyone's like big groups of people, I'm never the one to talk. I like one-to-one conversations, like we're kind of doing now. But once I have a couple of drinks, I literally don't care, and I feel much more at ease. But the thing with me that puts me off alcohol above anything is maybe it's just the way I react to depressants. I just get incredibly depressed the day after, even if I have one or two drinks. Yeah. And nothing is in me to kind of go, screw it, hair the dog, I'll do it again. And that's the bit I kind of struggle to understand. Like, what would make you want to grab the bottle again after feeling so bad?
I think
exactly.
as well for you there, Sam, like it's interesting because you said, and this is probably a lot of people, you rely on the drink to make you feel like a different person. And it goes back to what Simon was saying about being codependent on the drinking and using drinking as the solution, not the problem. But then as we started the pod, I said there's a lot of repercussions to drinking, and whether you think it's a solution or not, when you're drinking, you're in a different mind state and you can't really control what you're doing or saying. So is that really a good choice to be a different person that you don't even know who that is?
Yeah, exactly. No. Yeah, it is a social lubricant, as you say, Sam, and most people. So I think it's one in 15. I mean, it's still a lot, but 1 in 15 people exhibit traits that are consistent with alcoholism in the UK, for example. That's an estimate. So that's a lot, but there's 14 people who don't, and those 14 people use alcohol in a way that they can take it or leave it. And it does. We're social animals, but we're also self-conscious. Yeah. And there's very few of us that feel entirely self-confident, and so it just loosens us up, and as a social lubricant, helps us to relate to others and let go, and dance and have fun.
But what that, so in that sense, sorry, Simon, what that stat doesn't tell you is those 14 other people could be around that one person, and as much as it's affecting the person drinking, it affects everyone around you as well.
Smashing point. Yeah, of course. Yeah, alcoholism is not just a disease or an issue just for the individual. It's a problem for the family and for everyone, and for the community and for society. I couldn't
So,
agree. Couldn't agree more.
Like, we always bring up stats and stuff, but there's the like hidden between the lines kind of thing. There's so many things that are a factor that we need to like really think of, and I think it puts everybody else's mental health at stake as well as the person that's going through it. So it's a good stat, but we need to be wary of every single person in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife has, I was an alcoholic. My alcoholic kind of behaviour started when I was 18, and I stopped drinking when I was 43. Although there's since 2006, I've been working very hard on I acknowledged my alcoholism. And I, have been working to control it, and finally abstained in 2017. But during that time, it's been a real roller coaster for her. I've shielded my kids from it as much as possible. I probably won't know until they go in their 30s to their therapist just how much of an effect my addiction has had on them. But in my experience talking to, and I've spoken to and know hundreds of alcoholics, the impact on the family is enormous, and the recovery, the solutions that we need. When you talk about helping alcoholics through into recovery, you've also got to help the rest of the family into recovery, and that's why you find with 12-step programs like AA that they have sister programs that are designed purely for the carers and the family of the alcoholic.
Do you ever feel like you had a lack of people that trusted you as well because of it? Because as you said, like it's the family going through it too, but like you may feel like you've changed and you're in a better mental state and you can control it more. But do you feel like people are reluctant to trust you?
Yeah, good question. I mean, in terms of, if I pick up where my story is, it's where I got to with my story. It kind of answer that question. So I came out of prison. I went into work, and I had this kind of weekend binge drinking pattern where I was successful at work and progressing up the ladder, whilst at the same time at the weekend getting into deeper and deeper trouble. And in 2006, after my wife and I had been married and had our first child, I got caught for drink driving. It had been a very, very dark time in terms of my drinking. There was no fun left in it. I was drinking to feel normal. I wasn't drinking to have fun. I was in a terrible panic state of anxiety and depression and just self-loathing, very, very negative mental states, and physically very unwell, psychologically very unwell. Do you know what? That night I was in the cell for having been caught for drink driving, and had crashed down around me. My wife was threatening to leave me. I was going to lose my child as far as I was got contact with my child. Definitely going to lose my driving license, possibly be back in prison, and almost certainly lose my job. And in that moment, there was a sense of peace and serenity. I didn't understand it at the time. I do now. But I was no longer trying to spin all these plates. They'd all crashed down, and there was a relief in okay, everything that I've been fearing happening, that I was going to hit this rock bottom. Well, I've hit it now, and the only
kind of
way
like
is
you've
up.
got nothing to lose now.
Exactly. So I came out of there with a kind of a resolve that I was going to ask for help, and I was going to stop trying to do this on my own. I was going to acknowledge that I had a problem, and I was going to sort it out. And I did. I came out. I found I started reading some books, and I found a rehab that was run by one of the authors of this great book, Ronnie Arrelson, This Being Human. And I went to this rehab, signed myself in for 6 months or so. It was a kind of twice a week thing, and what I was taught is all of this psychological stuff. So I was taught that I was taught that there are physical, biological aspects to addiction. So genetic predisposition, and the way that the brain develops, the reward pathways associated with dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and all of those things. There can be deficiencies in alcoholics that lead them to, or addicts that lead them to be desensitized to these types of experience, so they do more of it. There's all sorts of biological theories, but it was the psychological theories that helped me to understand things like codependency and attachment theory. Attachment theory is about the way that you relate to as an infant, to your caregiver. And if you feel as though you're secure in that relationship with, your mother, your father, your siblings, and so on, then you go out into the world in an adventurous and secure way. If for some reason those relationships are dysfunctional, then you can be very wary or anxious or codependent and so on. And it just makes those interpersonal relationships much more difficult. I learned about emotional regulation or dysregulation. So the ability to regulate your emotions is something that we learn as children. So we look at our parents from very young age, and the way in which they regulate their emotions in difficult circumstances, us to regulate our emotions when we're having painful or scary experiences. And if we don't learn appropriate coping strategies for the inevitable difficult times, hardships of life early on in life for some reason, then what we can do is we can retort to kind of self-soothing methods. So we might dissociate, as you've talked about already. There's a number of dysfunctional ways in which a child can learn to deal with difficult emotions rather than because they don't have the ability to process them.
I think it's interesting because what I'm kind of gathering from what you've just said is you're basically basing how you are on the role models you have around you. So your parents or your carer or whoever it is that's looking after you is going to be kind of your mold of who you're going to become.
Yes.
So if you don't have that strong bond with that person, then you really don't have that coping mechanism to pick up on.
Yeah.
I mean, what I kind of did was, because obviously my father kind of walked out. Luckily I had a granddad, so Simon's father, that really catered and looked after me and stuff. But and my idea of kind of like the father figure kind of fragmented out to different people and different inspirations and that type of thing. But I can guarantee if I did not have that, I would probably be in a similar state. Yeah. Sort of thing. So like having that glue that holds you together and role models when you grow up is so important. Like even now, like being 25, like it's so important.
Yes.
To kind of have something to aspire to, because humans are objective based. If you think about it, we want to always work towards something, and whether or not that's pleasing your father, pleasing your mother, pleasing someone, just working towards it. And if you don't have that, I think your whole value structure shifts, and then you don't really understand who you are, and then comes on the kind of the drinking habits. I don't know.
But if you don't have a role model, Simon, is there anything that you could advise what you should do if you feel like you want to find someone to follow?
Yeah. So that's a good question. I think there's a certain amount of this that is conscious, where we can look at our parents and say that perhaps they weren't the role model that we needed, or they didn't represent those things or teach us the things that we wanted to know. But an awful lot of it is subconscious and unconscious. This is happening as an infant. So as I say, it might be the obvious examples are, if you've got an absent father, for example, then we know from studies that has a detrimental effect on the way in particular in which boys develop, because they really do need that male role model. If you've got an abusive parent, it's quite obvious that that's going to have a detrimental effect on a child. But less obvious is, if you've got perhaps a mother or a father that suffers with depression, or, they're a workaholic, or not even a workaholic, but they have to work 2 jobs, because of social pressures. There is not necessarily the fact that a parent is incompetent or incompetent. It can be all manner of different factors that lead into a difficult childhood for us, and the upbringing, exactly. And the thing is that however well-intentioned and well-informed we might be, most of the parenting that we will bring to our children is perpetuating what our parents taught us, right? Because it's subconscious. And so, I mean, back to your question in terms of role models, because my parents were very God-fearing and religious, or they wouldn't describe themselves as religious, but believers, and actually the path that I wanted to go down was diametrically opposed to that. There was no one that really that I saw as a role model that was able to provide me with that guidance. And I think it was a major issue for me, because no one was saying to me, this is appropriate behavior in the world. As far as I saw it, all behavior out in the world was sinful, and and therefore you may as well fill your boots.
Is that because you were hiding the fact that you were drinking from your parents, so you couldn't relate to them?
Yeah, well, I mean, my parents didn't drink. There was never any drink in the family, and I had no experience of it. Drinking was, the domain of the damned, the sinners, and so there was no constructive picture of what it looked like to be a responsible drinker in the world. But this is kind of, I think the thing with this is that it almost it puts too much emphasis on the control that we have over whether or not we become an alcoholic or not, as though almost if we could change this facet and introduce this particular individual, we might be able to stop ourselves from being alcoholic. Whereas my experience is that there is a genetic predisposition, biological factors that play into this. Then there's the psychological component that is almost beyond the control of the parents and certainly of the child. That by the time you get to kind of adolescence, the damage has been done. And really, I think if the seeds of alcoholism are very, firmly entrenched and germinated by that point. And I suppose then what you've got is situations in, like you say, university is then a real nursery for bringing that kind of out, because you can hide out in the open with your alcoholism at university. And then various kind of traumatic experiences through life. I know people who've become alcoholic in their 50s or 60s because there was nothing traumatic enough in their life and they weren't involved socially in circles that drove them to drink a lot, but then they had some later life trauma, turned to drink, and within 5 years they're at rock bottom.
Okay. Brilliant. But I think I've only been in the circumstance when I've actually, I needed a drink. It kind of was just relating to what you were saying, Simon, about drinking on the weekends. Kind of like the reward situation. That's kind of how I perceive it. So if every time I pass my exams, every time I've done something right in my job, or something, there's like a special event or occasion that I'll go out and do it, sort of thing. I can see that and how it can kind of spiral out, because kind of like if you are working hard every week, you kind of do want a reward at the end, and it's like and it's the alcohol really is, I mean, not in the long term, but it's kind of like the short term cheapest option to give yourself a little bit of a booster.
In that sense, you start to reward yourself too much, and you, instead of a reward based system, you're using it as just a normal day-to-day thing that I should be doing.
That's the thing. That's when it flips, right? So you've got somebody who, to start with, has realized that they, when I take a drink, I feel disinhibited. I feel as though I can relax and be myself more. I'm having a good time, and they do that, and then they start to build up a tolerance, or they want to do it more regularly. So just not Saturday night isn't enough. I want to do it Friday night as well. Then I want to do it Thursday night. Your tolerance is up, so you're drinking more. Maybe you're starting to, black out a little bit, but there's no major consequences. At some point, that for those of us that end up in a kind of dependency, for those of you that don't end up with a dependency, you go where Sam goes, which is, this hurts. I don't want to keep doing this. Or I'm going to do it rarely, because the cost, in some cases it outweighs the benefits. Yeah. Right. So I'm going to do it sometimes, but
do you feel like
those of us that have
people that are in that situation have the mental capacity to understand that while they're going through it? Like, how can you, or maybe you've seen it. How can you advise someone to realize that they should, I don't know, stop really, or notice it's a problem?
One fantastic question, and the thing is that it's very easy now that I'm where I am, in terms of I'm outside of it, and I've reached a level of consciousness where I can look back on it and say, okay. But I look back on it and say, why couldn't I see that? And I've heard many alcoholics say the same. My life was falling apart. My wife was going to leave me. I was going to lose my child. I was going to lose my career. I was going to lose everything. And it was clearly alcohol that was at the center of this. Any normal person would say, stop drinking. But there's a really strong denial that happens, and just a weird lack of awareness. I remember the first time somebody said to me that called me an alcoholic. I was really, I was. It was strange. We'd been to an all-night party in a warehouse in Bristol. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and the sun was up, and we were all looking a bit blurry-eyed and whatnot. And somebody said, "Come back to my house, and we'll chill out for a bit, as you do." And I said, "Have you got any booze?" And they said, "No,
that's not chilling."
I said, well, I don't want to come back to yours then. They said, You're an alcoholic. And I said, no, I'm not. And I thought, of course, no one is going to want to go back to yours if you haven't got a drink. And then a few people said, well, I'm quite happy to go back and have a cup of tea. And I thought, you lot are weird. Why would you want to do that? That sounds really
That's
crap.
What I do. Like, it gets late at a party, like 2 or 3 a.m. It's like, I'll put the kettle on.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And so that is actually sensible behaviour, because you're looking for something that's going to rehydrate you, something that's maybe going to stop you feeling so knowing your limits, dizzy or nauseous.
And I think I just want to revert back to what you said before. You said, oh God, what did you say? 1 second. It's just gone from me. You said about, so it was at that point where you were arrested for drink driving, and you realised that you had nothing to lose, because what you were worried about was it had happened, the inevitable happened. What do you...
Yes, yeah.
Do you feel like people need to go through that to...
That's what I was thinking. Do you need to hit rock bottom before you? Do you need to find
your trigger point where before you hit rock bottom, that you realise I've got too much to lose?
Yeah. So really great question. The thing is that the rock bottom is a subjective term, because what one person's rock bottom is not another. So you can see, what we think of as the kind of quintessential drunk, park bench drunk, covered in sores and probably, very jaundiced and lost absolutely everything, including their teeth and, family. And you just can't associate with that level of that low that these people have descended to. Whereas my rock bottom, which happened in 2017, was just a recognition that I was about to lose everything. And most importantly, that I was about to damage my children. So I think, and what I'm referred to as is a high bottom drunk, which means that the point at which I hit rock bottom was a high, relatively high. But yeah, I think so. If we differentiate between, we haven't really talked about definition, but if we differentiate between an alcoholic as someone that develops a dependency on alcohol, and alcohol abuse or harmful alcohol use as somebody who is engaged in alcohol habits that are not good for them or for the people around them, then the former, I don't believe that somebody with alcohol dependence, or I don't know anyone with alcohol dependence that has managed to control their drinking and or abstain from alcohol without having reached
their
a rock
idea
bottom,
of rock
or had a
bottom.
kind of what some people call a spiritual emergency. Whereas I think with other people, and I have lots of friends who get home from work, and the first thing they do is pop a cork on the wine bottle or crack a beer, and it's just become habitual to, this is to do with dopamine. So our dopamine, our reward system, it flags particular contexts or circumstances as being appropriate for a particular behavior. So as soon as you walk in that door, associated with getting home and kind of going, letting the day kind of fall off you, is opening the beer, opening the fridge and hearing that, and so it's not so much about the alcohol as it is a kind of ritual, and it's associated with rewarding behaviors. And actually what you can do is you can get to a point where somebody might point out that you're doing a bit too much of that. You're drinking, 1 or 2 bottles of wine every night. You're supposed to limit it to, if you're going to be healthy, to 14 units a week. So maybe you want to look at those things. And in that case, then things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which your doctor can refer you to, or you can personally, you find a therapist. They will help you to look at those habits and look at the kind of assumptions that are underneath it, and to say, okay, well, that's not a behavior that I want to continue to do. And so you gain an awareness of what it is that's driving you to do those things, and how perhaps you'd like to reconfigure your life to make it
being
healthier
the person
and happier.
that tells that person they're doing it a bit too much. Obviously, on the receiving end, a lot of the time they're going to become defensive. I do feel like, personally, I think the person who's trying to stop the other person, they should be a bit more persistent and not give up, because it can be just one thing that you say to them that will make them go to a doctor or a therapist or a counsellor that will change their lives. And I think a lot of people might tend to give up on people.
Yes. Yeah, it's a really, really tricky one, and I can only really talk to my experience, which is that my wife was intolerant of my drinking. So a lot of my friends were kind of like, yeah, you're a great crack, and it's always good fun when you come out drinking, because we never know quite what's going to happen. And so they kind of reinforced this image that I had of myself as drinking being a positive thing. Whereas my wife, as soon as she saw me crack that first beer, I could see that there was a distance between us. And you know, if she wasn't telling me that she was unhappy with me drinking, then I felt it. And at the time, I thought, you know, moody cow. Why
and it makes you want to drink even more.
I deserve a drink. You know, I've been working hard. This, that, and well, that was my excuse. But you know, the fact is that if she hadn't been persistent and consistent in the way in which she treated my drinking and hadn't made me feel uncomfortable at times, then the chances are I may not have ever dealt with it. I guess that was more of a trigger for you to realise that this is bad behaviour,
you know,
as quickly as I did.
Whereas you feel like it was a reward, but for her it was kind of like punishment.
Yeah. And the thing is that you know, very often in men's groups, we all want a clown. Don't we? You know, it was interesting when I stopped. So pick up where I was on my personal story. I stopped drinking. You know, when I went into rehab, I stopped for about 6 months, and I when I came back to it, I thought I'd solved all my problems. I thought, okay, I understand the mental, the psychological and physical components of this now, and so I can go back to drinking, and I'll be able to control it. And so I'm just going to drink shandy, right? So I don't need to drink a lot. It'd be nice to be able to be involved in drinking, go to the pub and actually have a beer in my hand, but I'm not going to drink anything strong. Well, in a very short period of time, I guess, first of all, it's really difficult to get drunk on shandy. You end up in the toilet most of the time. And before long, I was back to hiding the fact that I was having a few drinks before I went out, and then I'd go to the bar to get around, and I'd have a quick couple of shots of vodka whilst I was there. And, you know, all the sneaky behaviours started to come back in, and I really couldn't understand, you know, how this had come back in, you know, how I thought I'd solved my problem. And in 2012, I had another really terrible episode of drunkenness, 5-day binge whilst I was on holiday with the family. And I realized with kind of delirium tremens DTs on the 6th day I'd stopped, I had this kind of insight that this was a soul sickness, not just a mental or emotional issue, but there was something deeper going on. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't want to go, you know, as far as I was concerned, spirituality and, you know, was tied up in Christianity, which was all kind of, you know, Godified, Bible bashing. I didn't want any of that. You know, I'd rebelled against that and run away from it. But I was into Russell Brand. I liked him as a comedian. I realised he was an addict, and he was ranting on about meditation. So transcendental meditation is what he learned. So I thought, okay, I could do that. So I came back and I learned how to meditate. I learned TM, and I started to practice this. Daily, and within about 6 weeks, I couldn't believe how it had changed my life. The social anxiety had gone. I just felt more comfortable around people. I felt as though I was gaining an awareness of myself that was authentic, you know. And for the first time in my life,
and that was the realization.
The better person was sober Simon rather than drunken Simon. Yeah, there was a realization at that point that actually, when I'm drunk, I'm a dick. When I'm sober, I have the possibility of being a good person. And so I started to isolate myself away from events and people that were associated with drinking, because however much the meditation helped me to develop an awareness and grow as a person, as soon as I picked up that first drink, I was back out of control.
So Simon, let me just jump in there. So like when you pick up your first drink, I don't know what it is. I kind of picture when alcoholics have a drink. So like they have the first one, and then they need the second one. You know what I mean? Like I'm not really like that, because I don't really understand that. So I can perfectly go out with mates, and I do this a lot of the time. I'll just have one or two and I'm fine. But like when I see like a couple of my mates that are quite heavy into drinking, they have the first one, 2 minutes later they're at the bar like, I need another drink, I need a drink. And it's just like well, morals go out the window. Well,
that's an interesting point. You know, the way that alcoholism and addiction used to be characterized as a moral failing, and we still look, don't we, at people that overdo it and say, you know, you're just lacking in kind of moral fiber. But the truth is that is people who are suffering with addiction are not bad people trying to get good. They're sick people trying to get well. The compulsion that takes hold of an addict, whatever their substance, is not one that is related to willpower. There's what you realize with addicts, and the first step of the 12 steps is a realization that you're powerless over it. So there's various kind of, quotes that you'll find, but one of them is that for an alcoholic, that one drop is too much, an ocean full is never enough. It sets off a biochemical reaction, which is referred to in the 12-step traditions as an allergy. It sets off a reaction that drives for more and more and more. And it's not about I'm having a good fun on one, so I'll have a better fun on two, and even better fun on three, which is what you would assume. It is just an uncontrollable compulsion. I mean, how many people listening to this have been in a situation where they've, someone's phoned up and said, come out for a drink. And you said, no, I can't. I've got a presentation at work tomorrow, or I've got an exam, or, I've got an important something or other, and I need to have my wits about me. And I don't want to be hungover, so I'm not going to do it. And they say, come on, we'll just have one or two in a game of pool, right?
Yeah. And
you go, okay, I can do that. 1 or 2 pints, a game of pool. I've worked hard today. I deserve it. I'll just have 1 or 2. And then woken up, with your face in a pizza on the sofa like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you don't know what happened. That's alcoholism. And if that repeatedly is happening to listeners, then you need to take a look at your drinking, because one of the major signs of a potential addiction issue, is that you tell yourself that you're going to do one thing and you don't stick to it, and you're incapable of sticking to it. And it's not a matter of willpower. You've got, for me as an alcoholic, and for every alcoholic I know, as soon as that first drink is taken, there is
there's no going back.
Not always, but most of the time, I am out of control. I am utter. No, it's like you've flipped that first domino. All I've done is flick the first one, but now it is just whirring round. Yeah, whirring.
I could just see the frustration in that, though, because the whole culture, especially in England and the United Kingdom in general, it like the whole culture is kind of drinking, and to kind of sit there, with like everybody's got like a Corona. Well, probably wouldn't say that now, but everybody's got like I don't know, just a beer. And
common saying people say, if someone's going to jump off a cliff, are you going to jump as well, kind of thing?
Yeah. But you can understand the frustration though, Naf, can you? Because like if you go and like into social situations, and and if you've got mates like mine, like, well, what you doing, like, and you just like, why are you not doing a shot with me? Why are you not doing this? And I think if you're like socially anxious and you want to get in with a specific crowd, like the peer pressure from that is just insurmountable. It's just so much, and I have been in situations where, like you said, Simon, not to the point of I'm doing it every weekend, but I've done it like on a handful of occasions.
A lot of my friends that did drink, and even if they did invite me out and I ever did go out, I would never succumb to drinking. And I'd never feel like I needed personally to drink to be a confident person. I'm quite a loud person as it is. And I felt like I could just mould myself into the personality that needs to be in the room. Yeah. And I think it's about willpower of realizing that, okay, well, maybe they might see me as boring, but I don't really care because I can have fun without it.
So what that sounds like to me, Naf, is that you are secure. So it sounds as though you have a secure attachment as a child, and what that means is that you're not constantly looking outside of yourself for approval from other people, because you have because there's so many different ways of looking at this issue of addiction and the things that drive us or contribute to driving us towards addiction. But one of them for me is about a sense of who I am and belonging, right, and self-worth. And when I go into an environment with other people, what I naturally do is I carry a stick. A wise person once said to me, I carry a stick, and I use that stick to measure myself against other people and then beat myself with. And what happens with people that have had insecure attachments as children, that have had traumatic experiences, or have not been able to develop who they really are, have had to hide behind, certain masks and whatnot, is that they can create this ideal, it's called an idealized self. So it's, who should I be in that environment? You just said, you feel as though you can adapt. Well, adaptation to a particular environment is good. Humans are very good at adapting, and it's important that we adapt ourselves in order to, to some extent, in order to fit in with the people around us. But when you take that to an extreme, you don't really know who you are, because what you become is a chameleon. I mean, what color is a chameleon? No one really knows, because it just picks up the color of the environment around it as a form of camouflage. And this is what happens with neurotic people that have had these difficult early childhood experiences, not been able to develop a true sense of who they are. They just become whoever they feel they should be in that environment, and it's stressful. It's really hard to play this game of trying to be who you think other people want you to be. And it is much easier when you've got a drink in you.
Insecurity then.
So there's, massively. I mean, every alcoholic that I know, and certainly myself, has a deep sense of self-loathing, a shame. There's a shame about who we really are, because we don't know who we really are, or didn't know whilst we're drinking, didn't really know who we were. And there's a fear. There's always a fear that that's going to be exposed. That they're going to rip off the mask and kiss, to go back to The Mask. I hope everyone's watched The Mask. You're going to be exposed in your brown pajamas, right, with your sad little life, and everyone's going to they're going to jeer at you and abandon you, and and so on. It's a deep sense of self-loathing and self-hatred and shame that extends from childhood. It's very, very painful. Drinking for people who are alcoholics is not about this is the common misconception. It's not, I want to have as much fun as possible. It's not about, just unbridled hedonism. It's medicine. And the medicine works for a bit and it stops working, so you have to take more, and then the medicine starts making you sicker than the problem you had in the first place. It's great to hear
from you, because you sound a lot more confident in where you are now, and talking through it. Maybe you're living through this again, talking through it with us, but it's a great inspiration for people that are going through it, and I do commend you, and I think you deserve a bit of a round of applause for what you've gone through and how you've come out of it. So
well, thank you. I'm not sure I deserve that. I haven't told you half of the things I've done wrong, but I'm where I am today not because of anything that I've done. I'm here today because there are systems, or there are wisdom traditions, and there are systems of support out there in the UK and around the world.
Yeah, and I think the birth of the internet as well will have like a kind of a knock-on impact to the, that Simon, you said the drinking rates for use is kind of declining a little bit. I reckon because the share of information is so much easier, and you can connect with groups and you can attend meetings, life is just so much easier in that regard.
20 years ago or 10 years ago, the position you're in now could have happened a lot sooner.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the thing is that there remains a stigma around addiction, but it's less and less every day, because as you both rightly point out, information disseminates a lot more easily now. We have the internet, and the fact is that this is the emphasis on men. The fact is that men are. Our culture is evolving to allow men to express themselves and to talk. It's no longer, seen as wussy for men to actually open up, or not so much to open up and share their issues with other men. And
it's to make them less of a taboo subject, and. It's really I do feel quite honoured having you on, because a lot of alcoholics might not even want to discuss their story because of what they've been through, but I think it's getting over that shame of the past and forming more of a better future for yourself, and you seem to be doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of Joseph Campbell and what's known as the hero's journey, or the monomyth.
You've briefly gone over it with me, but
so basically, I mean, it sits underneath pretty much all of the big stories that we tell each other in society, from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings and whatnot. And very briefly, what it's about is the journey that we all go on in life, where we start from we have the opportunity for personal growth through this journey. So you start in an ordinary place, you then are given a calling, and you're called out into some sort of adventure. And during that adventure, you go through a really difficult time, a crisis, some sort of personal trauma, and the way that you deal with that and you overcome that enables you to you return home with the wisdom and the gifts that you gained through that process, and it goes round and round. Okay, and this is how life evolution is like a spiral. We go round, and we hopefully elevate our consciousness as we go round. So this, for me, alcoholism, although the idea for anybody who's listening who drinks and thinks that they've got a problem, I guarantee you that you're thinking about, well, if someone told you that you were never going to be able to drink again for the rest of your life, you'd seriously weigh up whether it was worth continuing to live, because if you're an alcoholic, that's how you think. The alcohol is everything. We are absolutely obsessed with it. If we're not doing it, we're thinking about it or recovering from it. And the fact is that it feels as though there can be no life after alcohol. That's certainly how I felt. It's going to be dull and glum and boring. And I remember asking someone, what do you do at the weekends if you don't drink? And they said, we go to the cinema or we go for a meal. And I was just like, how dull can you possibly get? But the truth is that what I found is that when I stopped drinking 3 years ago, it was tough for maybe 3 or 4 months, but each time I went through an event like Christmas, right? So I stopped drinking on August the 14th, and a few months later I got to Christmas. Well, I'd never been through Christmas without drinking, and my birthday's at Christmas. I thought, this is going to be so shit. And actually, I had an amazing Christmas because I really connected with people in a way that I couldn't while I was drunk. And I felt closer to the children and to the family and to the whole spirit of coming together at Christmas. And I had a great birthday with friends. And do you know what? I got through that and I thought, and
you were more conscious of what was going on.
That bad. Actually, it was better than when I was drinking because, and I used to get home from, I used to get to the end of a Christmas holiday, for example, and everyone would be back in at work, and I would feel wretched. And they're talking, about what a great time they had and what they did, and I just feel like I want to die. Every time I went on holiday, I came home absolutely ruined rather than refreshed because of alcohol. Suddenly I start to build up these experiences where my brain is rewiring itself, neuroplasticity. I'm refiring my brain with experiences that don't involve alcohol. And each time I go through these, I got a new appreciation of how life can be wonderfully joyful and peaceful and fulfilling without alcohol. And so I did a full revolution of the sun. 1 year, I'd pretty much done everything, and it was all good. Some difficult things that I wish I could have done, I can't because I'm not drinking. 2 years go round, and it gets even easier. And 3 years on Friday, and I feel as though I have the life beyond my wildest dreams. I can't imagine how I was lost in that delusion that alcohol was providing me with any sort of joy.
And it's
or
amazing
fun.
where you're at now, to be honest.
It was destroying my life.
And there's one question I really want to, I think, get answered from your point of view. While you were in that alcoholic state, what do you wish you were told or were made aware of that you think people should be aware of now?
I think, and this is what I intend to do. So I intend to go into addiction recovery and some sort of outreach to people. And I think what would have been helpful. The only person who can talk to an alcoholic really is an alcoholic. In my experience, it's the only people that can understand it, because it's batshit crazy. It doesn't make sense to anyone else unless you've been there. So what would have been helpful for me is if another alcoholic had been able to, and I don't know how it would have landed with me, and I probably would have resisted it and denied it and told them to do one, but if possible, I would like another alcoholic to have said to me, there is an amazing life beyond your wildest dreams that can happen in sobriety. Alcohol is not improving your life, it's destroying it. And all of the fear and anxiety that you use alcohol to try and douse, right, will be gone. It's the alcohol is not, it's perpetuating those problems. It is not solving it. You may have some residual anxiety and fears and issues from childhood, but you have a chance of dealing with those through therapy and through, various means that I'm sure you guys talk about on this channel. There's lots of resources out there to help you to deal with difficult early life experiences or traumas through your life, where you can really start to heal yourself. But you can't do it while you're still drinking. Because
that's a brilliant piece of advice, really. And
issues.
And I think that's even helpful for people that, not just the alcoholics, but people that are surrounded by them, that they can help get them that support system from maybe someone who's been through it. Because it's all well and good someone who's not been through it trying to tell you that life can get better, but until there's some personal experience they can relate to, nobody's going to listen. And that's why 12-step programs, or what are often called mutual help groups or mutual help organizations, MHOs, are so useful. Because what happens is whether it's alcoholism or drug addiction or sex or gambling or any number of addictions, and increasingly kind of gaming and stuff like that, when you get a group of people, the thing is that we're human beings, are social creatures, and what we want is to bond, and we want to connect with other people. That's ultimately what we want to do, is connect with other people and connect with a deeper sense of meaning in life, a true self. But without going into that spiritual side of things, we want to be in a group with other people where we feel valued and we feel heard and we can hear other people. When you go into these mutual help organizations and you sit around and you talk about a common ailment, or something that concerns each of you, and you find that those other people are having the same thoughts and fears and experiences as you no longer feel so ashamed away from this. Whatever we discuss, especially obviously an addiction, no matter what that person is thinking, you're not alone. Like, there's other people going through the exact same thing you're going through.
Yes, yeah. I remember walking into a room of alcoholics and sitting down with them, and they shared things about their They shared things about their lives that I had never told anyone about my life. I never thought that I would ever have an opportunity to share it because I was so ashamed. And there they were, openly sharing these things and saying, this is quite normal. This is how we behave. And suddenly that destigmatization and the release of some of that shame enables me then to, integrate those things in my experience into who I am.
Well,
and
I think it comes up as
helps you
almost
to come
like
closer to
like
your
I was
true
saying at the
self.
start, like humans are majorly objective based. So like when you're drinking sort of thing, like I think the objective kind of goes out the window and you need something to kind of work towards. And I think routes like AA, having like a goal in mind can be that would really help me. And then you're having people that you can relate to. I just think that's so important, like especially with like me and Naf talk quite heavily on depression and stuff. Not just on the podcast, but just like outside of it. And just that act of actually talking someone that kind of knows what you're going through it's so important.
I think as well, when you're advising someone and you haven't gone through what they're talking about, you often kind of disacknowledge the actual thing they're going through. And until you've experienced it yourself or some form of it, you're unable to give ethical advice, I guess.
Yeah. Because and I understand it. It looks to the outside world as though you've just got someone who's a bit greedy. They're just having one too many. Why don't they stop? And I'm guilty of it myself. I look at people and I think, well, if you don't want that to keep happening, stop doing it. But only we know, the people that have been caught in it. We know that it's not within our control. That we are powerless over it. I mean, one thing that I would say, kind of finally about this is that there is a meaning crisis in our society, in our culture, where we've lost any real sense of direction. I think we used to have kind of religion and then science and with science, there's a bit of a disenchantment of society where we've lost sight of anything beyond the kind of material or flesh level of being. And what my recovery has showed me is that there is a deep purpose and meaning to life, and I think in recovery, all the addicts that I know that are in recovery, what they find is that all of the terrible things that led into the addiction, and then the terrible things that happen in addiction themselves, can actually be put to wonderful use in helping to heal other people. And so there's so instead of your alcoholism or your addiction or whatever being, a shameful cross that you carry, it becomes a medicine bag that you carry to help other people. And there's a deep and in that, so it's there's a sense of meaning that emerges in recovery that is deeply fulfilling. That should not be.
I think at this point we've covered quite a lot, and I guess we could carry on talking forever. But at this point, we feel like we've given sufficient amount of information. Do you agree, Sam?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we can always get you on again, Simon, if there's something else that crops up with substance abuse or alcoholism or anything like childhood trauma or that type of thing. We definitely want to get you on again.
Yeah, so it's been great having you.
Yeah, I'll be honoured to come back, guys.
We're going to do the outro, but thanks for coming on, Simon. It means a lot.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, this has been Just Mates, and as you've probably just heard, we just had Simon on, and he's given a great amount of advice for everyone listening, and there's things that I've learned that I didn't know. So, yeah, man. Yeah, no, it's been really insightful. I mean, I know Simon quite well, obviously, because he's my uncle, but he said some things I was just like, was shocked. So it's the great thing about this podcast. It's like when we had Dom on, the military guy. He said a bunch of things that I just, there's things that I didn't know about him, and everything fleshes out. And it just goes to show that until you talk about it, there's so many different avenues and so many things that you're just unaware of.
Yeah, man. No, it was really good, and yeah, we'll definitely get him on again, because I feel like this will crop up maybe some point in the near future, and it'll be really good to dive into maybe some aspects we didn't really go into, but we covered a lot today.
A lot. And hopefully anyone that's a recovering alcoholic going through it or feeling like they might be going through it has taken a lot of information from this and realised there's a better route out, and alcohol is not the answer really. And as easy as it is to say that, but we've just had first-hand experience and advice from someone who's been through it.
Yeah, and you can see how detrimental and how damaging it can be to your life. But yeah, as Naf said, and this is our message through all of our podcasts, is there's always light at the end of the tunnel. And
the biggest point is you're never too old or too young to recover. I mean, Simon said he's 46 and his recovery really officially started at 43. And some people might think that's too long or too old, but there's no age barrier. There's no milestone for when you have to have recovered by. It can happen at any point in your life.
Yeah. Should we cap it off there, mate?
Yeah. Let's call it a day. Well, this has been Just Mates. You can find us on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Just Mates Pod. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Just Mates Podcast as well. I've been Nafees.
I've been Sam.
And see you later.
See you later.
Bye.